how will that not escalate the war, the military conflict going on?
I think that you can do things like if you tried. So there are logistical issues, but let's pretend for a moment that that we can solve those. If you were to take a NATO force and to insist to Putin that NATO is going to open up this evacuation corridor from the sea, and that if there's any interference from Putin on this operation, essentially in private, you would signal that Putin risks his Black Sea fleet. Now, that fleet is of incredible strategic importance to Putin's future plans, but it is of relatively little importance to his current plans now that he has troops on the ground and they're operating as a land force. So that puts him in a position of risking a critical future component for his plans, but not something that necessarily stops him on the ground today. So the West could pressure that, and I think get him to decide that it wasn't worth, keeping civilians in Mariupol and losing his Black Sea fleet, and that there's at least a reasonable chance that he would allow some sort of evacuation, even if it wasn't perfect. Anybody you can get out is better than nobody. And you could do things like if you were going to target a Russian ship, you could either shoot to kill, or you could have an escalation ratchet. You could shoot to disable the ship. And if you did that and disabled it, that would give you a pause in the escalation and another opportunity to negotiate with Putin to say, stop interfering, allow this operation to go forward. That's one option. You could create similar sorts of plans in the West that would provide some sort of no-fly zone in places like Lviv and create these safe harbor places. Now, I don't think that having a no-fly zone with NATO aircraft is necessarily the only way to do this. I think if you get in anti-air weapons and anti-battery, counter-battery radar systems for Ukrainian artillery, you can effectively create a no-fly zone from the ground up. And I think if you look, most of the losses have been taken from artillery and missiles, and not from bombing. And so I think you could sort of thread the needle and create what Ukraine needs while limiting the escalation risk, because you're not actually putting NATO jets in the air. And if you decided to put NATO jets in the air later, you always could. So you can try option one to build these things out on the ground, and then move to option two if you had to. And I think that that's a way that NATO could put real power behind Ukraine with acceptable risk.